heads up on that. So yeah, first off, thanks all for joining today. I know Fridays are not ideal days, but I do it for a couple of reasons. If you're wondering why why it's on a Friday, so for one, I know a lot of you are doing a lot of classes, most of which fall earlier in the week. So I kind of did it to stagger a little bit. On top of that, this one I prefer to make mandatory. I know a couple students reached out to me that they couldn't attend, but I make this first one mandatory just because I want to make sure that you guys are fully I want to make sure that you fully understand all of the requirements of this course and make sure that we're on the same page. This is really an open communication class, so I'm here to help you every way and every bit that I can. So yeah, the first one's mandatory, and then kind of moving forward, every Friday, this 9 to 10, I'll be on here, of course. But if you have no questions or your work schedule or something else interferes, it's totally okay. I will record them typically if students are there. And then I will say too that I again recognize that a lot of you work different shifts, have a ton of other classes, have personal lives. So, I'm here to help you the best I can. So, if you ever want to meet individually, either in person or online, please send me an email and we will find a time that works for you, whether it's super early in the morning, late at night, whatever time works best for you, I will make work for my schedule. So even though this isn't an online class, I am here to help anyway. And yeah, so hopefully we'll have good communication over the next 7 weeks. With that in mind, this is only a 7-week course, so it moves very, very quickly. If you have not taken a 7-week course before, I swear it's like just like snap of the finger and we're over 7 weeks. So so today we're gonna kind of talk about the course ELT 274, talk about how it's ran. It is a little bit unique because it is a CBE style course, which we'll talk about that in a minute. So if you have not taken a course like that, this is going to be a little bit of a unique situation. Hopefully it's a good situation for you. So yeah, I guess before we get started, I'll introduce myself. So my name is Summer Grooms. It says Hot on there. That's my maiden name. I always laugh. I'm like, I think I go by both names because I always forget to change up the stuff. So it's the same person. And yeah, I've been at Jackson College now for, gosh, a couple of years, but it's only been full-time since October. So I'm very grateful to be full-time now. Now I get to go on campus more, which is great for students that want to meet in person. And yeah, so I guess kind of how I got into this role. I have an engineering degree from MSU, both bachelor's and a master's degree in environmental engineering, which of course is a little bit different than taking a ton of electrical courses and being an electrician. But being an engineer, we had to take a wide variety of courses, a lot of which related to engineering or related to electricity, just because electrical engineering is kind of a similar branch of engineering. So we had to take a lot of the same courses. So that's kind of how I ended up here. ELT 274 in particular is a lot about the rule book, the National Electric Code, which I also know a decent amount about just because I did work for the government for a couple of years. I worked for the state of Michigan and oversaw a lot of water plants, so drinking water plants, Jackson included. And you wouldn't think that electricity plays any role there, but it does at water plants, just because of everything nowadays is done automatically and not manually. And so a lot of the kind of code book requirements would come up there. So that's a little bit about me. Like I said, we'll kind of talk through the course today. We have plenty of time. I'll make sure everything's clear and we're on the same page. And then, of course, I'll save time at the end too if there's any questions, concerns. Hopefully after today, you'll fully understand kind of the requirements of the course and you'll be good to go. But before I get started, just going to check in. Are there any questions, concerns, anything up front that anyone wants to ask? Not hearing anything, so that is good. Please stop me anytime today. I know sometimes I talk fast, especially for 9 in the morning, but I'm a morning person. So please, if I talk too fast, let me know and slow it down, and feel free to interrupt anytime if there's questions. So okay, so I see when you put something in the chat. So yep, good question. It is totally okay if you use a 2017 um electrical book, and we'll talk through the course requirements in terms of like the book right now, actually, because that's a good place to start. So for those of you who haven't taken an online course before, hopefully you've all been able to access Canvas. This is kind of um, the face of Canvas here. You can see that if you click on the My Courses tab, you'll see all your courses. Of course, we're in 274, so that's why I clicked on that one. And the courses are all kind of outlined differently. You'll see that this one, there are a couple different tabs, and we'll kind of walk through all of those tabs today. On the side here, this home page is where you'll get to like everything you can see here. And then your grades is where, that's the only other important tab there. That's where you'll see your grades for this course. So those are the two big tabs. Okay, so let's start with the syllabus. Under the getting started here, the syllabus is right here. So it's ELT 274. You should be able to download it. And okay, so this is a 3-credit course, and it's totally online. So there's no requirement for you to come into person. So if you live far away from Jackson, that's a good thing. You don't have to worry about having to do a long drive. But again, office hours with me are totally by appointment. I do have a Calendly link in Canvas, which I'll show you in a minute where that is. But yeah, like I said earlier, whatever fits your schedule, I will make work. So don't ever feel like you can't, reach out to me. Or I know, again, like sometimes being online courses, it's difficult to kind of have that connection or in communication with your instructor. So I really want to avoid that. So please, however I can help. So the course description, you can read a little bit about it here, but essentially this course is all about the National Electric Code. And the National Electric Code, I'll talk about in a minute, is basically the rule book for electrical design and installation. So essentially, it's, if you've never looked at it, it's very, very comprehensive. There's a lot of sections, a lot of pages. It's not always straightforward and easy to follow, but it is very fundamental for all those working around electricity to be able to navigate it. So that's what I would say is the most important thing from this course. It's not, you're not going to sit down in the next 7 weeks and learn everything from top to bottom of the National Electric Code. But the idea is that after this class, you're able to easily navigate through that electric code and easily find the answers that you want, because that's a point of the code, right? It's not, it's all written down because it's used as a resource and a reference, not as like a key for what you need to memorize. So ELT 150 is a prerequisite for this course. So with that in mind, all of you should have taken ELT 150. It probably wouldn't have let you enroll, but you needed a 2-point in that class. So I know a couple of times I've had students that like have somehow accidentally been enrolled in this when they failed 150. So please be mindful of that you should have had at least a 2-point in 150. If you remember, 150 is the residential course. So residential wiring, will definitely touch on a lot of that today, or not today, but over the next 7 weeks as you're in this course, just because the residential component is a big component for requirements in the NEC. Okay, so these are just the course objectives for the course. There's just 3, but of course they're pretty broad. So objective 1 is just, you should be able at the end of this course to apply and interpret the national and local electric codes. So again, there's a lot of codes related to the design, the installation, and the inspection of electrical systems. And these codes are essentially all put into place for the biggest reason, which is safety, right? And that's kind of the reason for the National Electric Code. It's to standardize everything, so everything's kind of on the same playing field and everything is as safe as possible. It's, the number one priority for both, and it's safe for, and it should be safe for the person that's actually installing the electrical system, but also the people who are going to be using the electrical system, whether it be residents, whether it be in a factory, or whether it be, in a business. So it's important for everyone involved. And one of you mentioned in the chat here using the 2017 book, which is totally fine. And I've gotten this question a couple of times. So just to kind of explain why there are so many different uh, textbooks, and that's because every 3 years the code book is updated. And when I say updated, I don't mean they like totally revamp the whole thing, but they'll essentially add, sometimes they'll modify sections, add a little bit, delete a little bit, maybe convert, something that used to be in paragraph form to like a table. So it's just they're making minor changes, and it makes sense, right? Because as time goes on, things only get more safe, and because of that, we have more rules. And that's really what it is. And they also do it to make things easier to interpret and understand. So either of those are fine. I'd say like 2017 to 2023. So that's 2017, 2020, or 2023. I have the 2020 copy. Those are all be fine. Again, it's minor changes. I wouldn't recommend getting like the 1937 copy. That might be like a little outdated, but the next couple of years, give or take, is fine. So the second objective here is, at the end of this course, you should have an idea of kind of how to design and evaluate electrical systems for safety and efficiency. So as you kind of go through this course, we'll really kind of touch on a lot of the requirements and really talk about why those are requirements, right? Like all of them, again, almost all the requirements in the NEC, whether it be the height of, how high an outlet has to be, or the color coding requirements, a lot of it and all of it is almost because of safety. It's to standardize everything. So we'll talk a lot about that. And then part 3 here, or objective 3, is to utilize technical tools for problem solving in electrical installation. So essentially with this, in the NEC, there's a lot of tables, there's a lot of diagrams, and that's the main component there. Is we want to make sure that you're able, after this class, to find information quickly using the NEC, specifically using some of the tables and diagrams they give. So textbook requirements. So there are 2 textbook requirements here, and I know kind of reading it firsthand, it's a little bit confusing. So to kind of clear this up a bit. So the National Electric Code, that's the actual code book, right? So it's a requirement that you get that code book for this course, and it's also good to have. I will say that you can get this code book free online, which I will show you in a minute here. But if you want a copy of it, I'm just pulling up Amazon. You can probably buy it at the bookstore, and then you can see that this is what the code book looks like. So you can see it's pretty thick. You can also get like tabs, which are kind of nice because they're like quick tabs, like you can easily go to whatever article you want. But you can buy it there. So, but I know it's expensive. So if you don't want to buy it, you do not have to buy the code book, because you go to NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Association. This is who actually creates the National Electric Code. And if you're wondering why it's a fire association, it's, of course, there's a lot of correlations between, it all goes back to safety. Fire and electricity, unfortunately, go hand in hand. Okay, sorry, my computer froze for a minute. So again, I just went to nfpa.org. You'll want to log in / create an account. I already have an account, so it's going to log me right in. And then it should let you create an account for free. You might have to use your Jackson College email, like an education email, but it should be free. And then I just type in National Electric Code into like the search box here. Okay, and this first one is it. Again, this is a code book, not the textbook. And then if you scroll down, this is actually a really good website, by the way, too. You can see that right here, where it says free access, you can click on what edition you want. So this is where I was talking about. You can see that every 3 years there's a new code book, and that's because there's updates every 3 years. So 2017, 2020, 2023, obviously, since it's free, I'd look at the 2023 and then just click free access here. and it'll open right up. So if you want the physical copy, that's fine, but just to save you some money, there it is free. And yeah, there's a couple videos that kind of talk through, if we have time at the end, I'll kind of talk through these different chapters and sections again of the actual code book. So this isn't to get confused with the actual textbook for the course. So this is the code book that is set by the NFPA, that is a code book for electricians to follow. So the other requirement when it comes to the textbooks for this course is there's an actual textbook here that is essentially like, I would think of it as it takes NEC and kind of converts it into more simpler terms. So it's really helpful for like for students that are, looking at the code book for the first time ever. Like this book has a lot of diagrams and pictures, and it basically summarizes the National Electric Code and puts it into more easier to understand terms, just because some of the times, like the way they word things in the code book is confusing. So I'm just going to copy and paste this to show you what it looks like. So this is what the cover looks like. You can see there are a couple different sections again. So like there's the 2020, the 2023, 2017. All of those should be fine, especially like looking, gosh, the 2017 is a lot cheaper. I think that's okay. If you want to get the 2017 copy and then again, the 2020 is the most ideal, but that's a big price difference. So, yeah, that should be okay. And we'll talk through probably in weeks to come, kind of the difference between the 2017 and 2020 code book. And of course, that's going to be reflected in the textbook. So that's another important thing to kind of look up, and you can look up to see what updates they make from one set to the other. It's also helpful and should be done for all electricians because they need to know if there's been any, massive changes or updates. Okay, so those are the textbook requirements. So again, you have the actual code book that you can access free on the NFPA website, and the textbook, which essentially summarizes the code book. So any questions about textbook requirements? Hopefully that makes sense. Okay, not hearing anything, so I'm hoping all that's clear. Okay, so now this is the other important thing to talk about, and that is the grading procedure for this course, because it does work pretty unique if you've never done a competency-based education course. So competency-based education, this is kind of one of the new trends that higher education is going into. So if you haven't taken a CBE course yet, you probably will take another one in the future. So again, CBE stands for competency-based education. And essentially what this means is, like in a traditional style course, the idea is you have certain requirements that you have to do, regardless of how competent you are in that area. And by competent, I mean how well you, like what prior knowledge you have in that area. You have a set number of requirements for what things you have to do to complete that course. Whatever grade you get on those, assignments essentially kind of average out and you fall somewhere along this sliding grading scale, right? Well, in a competency-based education course, a lot of that kind of goes out the window, because what it's saying is, the idea when you're taking these courses, especially in trades, when you're working, a lot of hands-on jobs, and where these skills that you learn in these classes are very important. The main thing is that you understand and take with you at the end of the course all of the competencies that you're supposed to learn throughout that course. So instead of focusing so much on like having a ton of assignments and busy works, essentially we're really focusing on the competencies for this course. So once you master all the competencies, however long that takes you, you essentially pass the course. So this really should benefit you, right? Because our idea and what my goal for you for this course is to have you all learn what you're supposed to learn, right? And, be able to take the knowledge into your future jobs, your future classes. I know some of you, your goal is hopefully that too, but also, you don't want probably a 2 or a 2.5. Some of you might have goals to get a 4. But this kind of aligns well with that too, because as long as you master all of the competencies, you will get a 4-point for this class. So, and how long it takes you to master those competencies or how much time and commitment it takes depends on your, how much knowledge you might have in the subject coming into it. So it might take longer if you have no electrical knowledge, but of course, it's not going to take like an excessive amount of time. It's going to take the normal amount of time it takes. So with that, there are really only 3 grades that you can get for this course, and that is a 4-point, a 1.5, and a 0. So the reason we do that is because competency-based education courses are a lot of times pass-fail. We have to give you a letter grade. So essentially, my goal is, I know this looks scary, but my goal is every single one of you in this class gets a 4-point. I do not want to give anyone a 1.5. And again, that goes back to my goal is I want to make sure all of you master all of the competencies in this class. So the way that you would get a 4-point is pretty simple because there's only 2 graded requirements of this course, and that is the final project and the final exam. You have to get 100% on both of those in order to pass this class. Again, sounds intimidating, but you have unlimited attempts and unlimited time. So really, there should be no reason why you can't get a 4-point and can't learn these competencies because you have, unlimited attempts at this project and exam. And also, this is why I'm here, because if there's something that you're really struggling with, send me an email and we'll meet and kind of talk about why you got something wrong in the exam or the project and talk about, that problem and how to answer it and how to understand it. So really, it shouldn't be too stressful for you. And hopefully with all of this, at the end of this course, you'll learn a lot. And that's my goal. So yeah, that's kind of how grading works. And today we'll have time to kind of talk about the final project and final exam and kind of how that works. But yeah, any questions about the grading for this course? Because I know that's different than what you've seen before. Okay, not hearing anything. I really hope that means that I explained everything clearly. Again, I think that the CBE style courses, I really like them. I like teaching them. And I think the students tend to like them too because, again, there's not a lot of busy work. The main objective of this course is you learn the skills and the competencies, and then you move on and use that knowledge. So, there's not a lot of busy work, and how much, busy work you do depends on how much you have to learn. So, yeah, and I'd say the other benefit too is it kind of standardizes things because, I know a lot of you already have jobs and you might be taking this course through your employer, but we also as instructors work pretty closely with a lot of like the industry folks. And, it kind of standardizes things in a way that we can say, yes, everyone who takes EELT 274 has a, thorough grasp on these course objectives because they had to learn them in order to pass this class. They all can apply and interpret the National Electric Code. They all can design and evaluate systems for safety. And yeah, so like that's the other, benefit is if you ever sit in interviews or, your employer ever asks like, what did you learn? This is what you learned. And, you really did learn it, right? Because it's, if you get a 2-point in a safety class, for example, like that's kind of concerning because does that mean you only know 50% or 70% of safe things, right? So that's kind of the idea here again, is that the idea is that you master everything. Other things on the syllabus, just to kind of point here. Again, you have to get 100% on the project and quiz/exam in order to pass the class, which means if you get one wrong, 49 out of, I think there's 41 questions. So 40 out of 41, you will fail or get a 1.5. So just be mindful of that again, is do not accidentally forget a question and I'll, throughout the semester send reminders if I see you have not a perfect score yet and check in. But yeah, please be mindful of that because that's the only thing that scares me about these courses is I would hate for a student to get a poor letter grade just based on not understanding the requirements fully. So my, main thing here is I want to make sure that you fully understand the expectations. So attendance here, just again, this first one's mandatory, but this is a pretty small class to begin with, but all of you on today, don't worry about attendance this week, of course. It's also not graded. So the only reason we kind of record attendance is because for online courses, especially, every week I have to update attendance. And if you're inactive for 2 weeks, I think it automatically drops you, or I'm required to drop you. So please be mindful of that every single week you should be doing some work. So whether that be or at least communicating with me. So either attending these meetings, emailing me to let me know, just to check in, or completing work in Canvas, are all ways that you can show that you're still enrolled and still taking the course, because I do not want to accidentally drop someone. So I would say the best and, fail-proof thing here is to either attend these or shoot me an email once a week as kind of a check-in. But you're not going to be graded for attendance. And the rest of this is pretty straightforward. You can, read the syllabus and reach out if there's any questions. Okay, so with that, now that we talked through the syllabus and the requirements, I figure I'll talk about the final project and final exam, but I'm going to pause again and just see if there's any questions or concerns. And let me do a time check. Okay, 9:30, so we're doing good. I'll probably save 10 minutes at the end for questions, so you only have to hear me ramble for another 20 minutes. But okay, and I'm going to turn off my camera just because sometimes my computer slows down. So okay, so now to kind of navigate this course, again, this is a 7-week course, so May 3rd is the last day of the course. So I would say all work should be done by May 2nd, just as like kind of a fail-safe. So you can see here, this is the final exam. You must receive a 40 out of 40 on it. I thought it was 41 questions, it's just 40. And this final exam really just relates to that first competency, which is implying and interpreting the code. So to kind of preview some of these questions, again, you get unlimited attempts, unlimited time. They're all multiple choice, and a lot of them are true and false. And they just ask about like specific ideas and requirements to kind of come through the code book. So for example, like this one is about distances of receptacle outlets, or what does it say? No point along the wall line for dwelling unit. Countertop, when it says dwelling unit, that just means like a house or apartment, shall be more than 48 inches from a receptacle outlet. So, you should be able to, in the code book, kind of find a section, the section that relates to probably the general equipment section of the code book talks about outlets, and you should be able to kind of find the answer. So the idea for this exam is that it is open book, right? You can use the code book, and I would highly encourage you to use the code book to find these answers and find, there's a section that talks about switchgear, switchboards, and panel boards, and find these answers. So the idea here is that you can, navigate through that code book. And this question 10, you should all get right now. So look at that, because we talked about how often the code book is updated. So yeah, that's kind of how the exam works. And again, you have the whole semester to do this, but I would highly encourage you to go through and do one attempt and see where you fall. And then you can kind of work backwards, and because maybe you know some of it. So do an attempt, and then you kind of get an idea of what areas you have to focus on, and then, read those sections of the code book. And then as for the final project, so there's 3 tabs here. You'll submit it in the submission tab. So if you click on this on your end, this is just the rubric. There should be a submit button where you can like upload a file. And like I said, the final project, you will have multiple attempts on that. So how that works is you can submit at any time and I'll grade it. And then it normally might take me 3 to 4 days to grade it. I'll try to do it as fast as possible. And then you'll see your grade. And if you have anything wrong, you can just go back and revise the question you got wrong. You absolutely do not have to go and redo every single question. It'll show you which ones you got wrong, so you know what you can go back and do. So I would recommend doing it in like a Word doc. And that way, if you get one wrong, you can just delete that question and then, retype it. So as for the final project, the questions, that's what this tab shows you. So if we download this, and there's a template, that was the third thing in this module area. The template just like has it all laid out. I'll pull that up too, actually, and then we'll talk through these questions. assemble it here as a Word doc. And so you can download this and it should open like this as a Word document. And then you can just type, your answers here. You'll have to hit enable editing. You type your answers here and then submit it. Another thing I would suggest is that you submit the final project after each competency. So you can see that there are questions for competency A, which was applying and interpreting the code, competency B, which was designing and evaluating the code systems for safety, and then competency C, which was related to utilizing technical tools. So there are questions for each of the questions, or for each of the competencies. And I would say submit it after part A, you finish it, because then you can go back and do what you got wrong or revise it. And that way, like once you get towards the end of this course, like you don't submit it and then have a ton wrong you have to go back on. So you can submit it, when it's half done to kind of gauge where you are, and I would encourage it. The other thing I just want to make sure is very clear. Again, you have to have all questions on that final project correct, which means you do not want to save your only or your first submission for the last week, right? Because if you submit it on a Monday, I might get back to you on a Wednesday on the grading and you might have things wrong, and then all of a sudden you resubmit it on Friday, and then if you still have things wrong, you don't have time to fix it, right? Because it's the end of the course. So for students that do fail this course, that is the common reason. It's just because they just waited until the last minute and then didn't have time to get feedback. So do not, please do not save the project in your first attempt, especially for that last week. So definitely, submit it. I highly encourage you to submit it as many times as possible until you get all of the competencies mastered. So, in the next 15 minutes or so, I want to kind of just talk through the final project, but I'm going to check in again to see if there's any questions or concerns about this. Okay. Doesn't sound like it. And actually, before I do that, I just want to talk through the rest of the requirements, or like what else is in Canvas for you. So you'll see that this is just about me. You don't have to open it if you don't want to. And then getting started. So make sure you do this getting started quiz. It just acknowledges that you understand the requirements for the course. And then the other good tabs in this, this link just shows the book you need for the course. You don't have to watch that if you don't want to, because we talked about it. The grading, we already talked about. The competencies, we already talked about the 3 competencies. The pacing guide is really helpful. So this kind of outlines what you should do each week. And again, since we meet on Fridays, it won't be mandatory, but I would say like it's a good check-in. So you have all week to do as much work as you can. And then on Fridays, if you attend these, you can kind of check in, talk about where you're at with the project, talk about any concerns you have, and we can, talk through something that might be confusing. So this talks about week 1. A lot of these requirements is what you are all doing right now. So, we're talking about the syllabus and grading and everything. And so then week 1 through 2, you should be completing part A of the project and also taking at least one attempt on the final exam. And then starting week 3, that's when we move from part A to part B. So, yeah, this kind of breaks it down there. And you can see by week 6, it says you should at least submit the final project. So that way you have some time to get feedback on it. So the rest of the Canvas course is just more resources for you. So you can see that it's broken down into the 3 competencies. There's some readings, some videos, a couple videos that I created just to kind of help you and help answer the questions. So the idea here is that, you can learn whatever way is best for you. So if, reading the textbook and finding the answers is the best way for you to learn, go for it. If attending these is the best way to learn, where we can talk through things, kind of face to face via Zoom, that's fine too. Or, there's all these resources. So some readings, a couple videos that might be helpful that relate to some of the questions that they ask in the project. And then here, these are all PowerPoints that come straight from the textbook. about various subjects. So the textbook itself, again, not the code book, is also kind of outlined in chapters. They're different chapters than the code book has. So for the actual textbook, there's a whole chapter that just talks about grounding. So it'll kind of bounce around to different sections and chapters of the code book where grounding is mentioned. And likewise, same for all of these. So yeah, if you just open these up, they should open up as PowerPoints, and they're kind of summaries of that chapter of the textbook. So they show some interesting diagrams and pictures and things that are helpful. So again, the idea here is that you learn all the competencies and you use whatever resources are helpful. And I hope that there are enough resources for you. So yeah, these are kind of how that's outlined. So this is what I mean by like, there's a lot of diagrams that kind of show requirements. You know, this is showing like a panel board and different connections. Okay, so the last 10 minutes or so, again, I'm just pausing. If there's questions, feel free to throw things in the chat. I don't see anything, but feel free to speak now too. I'll save 10 minutes at the end too, but we'll just kind of spend time talking about some of these questions from part A. And I'm not hearing any questions, so we'll kind of get started in talking. So part A, again, relates to applying and interpreting that National Electric Code. And you can see that it's broken down into, there's 11 questions. And these questions, I put in parentheses the chapter of the textbook, not the code book, that those questions relate to, just to kind of give you an idea to like start for like where to search for those answers. So this one here, there's 4 questions that relate to just understanding the National Electric Code, which is what chapter 1 of the textbook is about. And again, the National Electric Code is just that rule book for electricians and contractors and anyone who might be working around electricity. It's the rule book for what they need to follow. There's a good video that I had linked in YouTube that kind of summarizes quickly the National Electric Code. But yeah, it's really important to kind of understand, you know, like a broad overview of what the code book is. And a couple of things, another resource, I don't know if I linked it in here, but there's a good website. Oh, it's off. There's a good website. Mike Holt, he writes a lot of electrical books relating to the code book, and he gives a good, I can find it now, but he gives a good, I might have thrown it in Canvas, overview and summary of the National Electric Code, which is very helpful. And sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but I want to find this because I think it will be helpful. Oh, this is kind of interesting. So this shows what state is on what section session or what, I think. It shows, I am trying to think of the best way to explain this, but this shows like what edition, that was what I was looking for. It shows what edition each state is currently adopted. So not all states are on to the 2023 like adoption yet. Some are still stuck on the 2020, and actually some are still on the 2017. So like Michigan, since 3/12/24, which is interesting, all of the 2023 rulebook changes, I guess, are adopted for commercial use, but for 1 and 2 family dwelling units, that's still underway, which essentially what that means is, so Michigan's adopted the 2023 code book, but for the requirements in the code book that relate to like residential, we're probably still using the 2020. And they do that because it takes a while to like fully adopt and transition to the next code book. And again, there aren't that many changes, which is why it's okay that some of these are on 2017 still. And you can see that some states just use local code book requirements, so they don't use the NEC. And I'm imagining for those states that have only local electrical requirements, there probably is a requirement that they have to be more stringent than the National Electric Code. So that's how a lot of things work when it comes to, national versus state laws. State can either adopt the federal rules or they can create their own, but they can never be less strict than the like federal rules. They can only be more strict. So yeah, this is kind of interesting just to see where all states fall. But I know on this website he has a good outline of the code book for what each section talks about. But if not, we'll talk about it here in a minute because that is a question. Because you can see that question 1 here says, after watching that short YouTube video, it wants you to explain kind of the NEC and why it's important to standardize. We already talked about that. But then question 11, this is what I was looking for. This wants you to create an outline of the National Electric Code. So basically kind of give an overview of each chapter, again, of the code book and not the textbook. So this is a question I want to talk about in specifics because for this question, I would highly advise pulling up that code book here and looking and seeing what each chapter is talking about. So just to kind of summarize it right now for you in my words, and then you can, take what I say and either write some stuff down or hopefully this will help for that. So there are 9, I believe, chapters of the National Electric Code. Chapter 1 is just a general overview. So chapter 1 gives a lot of definitions. So that's what Article 100 is about. I'm going to zoom in so you can see. So essentially it's kind of outlined like this. It's in alphabetical order, and it gives definitions for various terms that you might come into contact with. So like ampacity, we all know what that is, appliance, applicator. So these are all words and terminologies that might come from the code book, and they're all defined here. 110 is a very important article when it comes to safety because this just talks about general requirements for any electrical installations. So it talks about not specific to a specific wiring or conductors or anything in specifics. It's just very broad overview of requirements. So chapter 1 is just kind of a general overview of the code book. And then chapters 2 through 4 kind of all go together. So these are focusing on specific subjects. So chapter 2 talks about wiring and wiring protection. So with that, it talks about I believe it talks about in that section the requirements when it comes to color coding wires and the insulation that wires need. Chapter 3 talks about wiring methods and wiring materials. So it might talk about what materials are allowed to be used for wires, what materials are not allowed, and when you might have to use one over the other. Chapter 4 is really fundamental for residential areas and specifics because it talks about equipment for general use. So it's going to talk about luminaires, so lighting units. It's going to talk about outlet. It's going to talk about microwaves, TVs, basically any, general use items. And it's going to talk about the equipment and the requirements for wiring those and anything like that. So this is a really, really important one. And if you click on this, so you can see that it's showing different articles and kind of how it's broken down. So article 402 talks about fixture wires, 404 talks about switches, and so forth. And then kind of moving forward, chapters 5 through 7 all go together. So they talk about special situations. So chapter 5 talks about special occupancies. So obviously there might be different requirements. If you're installing an electrical system in a hazardous location, like a factory where it might be exposed to high temperatures or extremely cold temperatures. So 5 talks about special occupancies. 6 talks about special equipment you might have to use and when you might have to use it. And then chapter 7 talks about special conditions, so kind of unique circumstances that you might have to change how you're wiring something or how you're installing a system. And then chapter 9, this is the one that is really important for competency C of this course, where we talk about utilizing the technical tools, because chapter 9 is all about all of the tables. So what I mean by tables is, of course, sometimes requirements when it comes to or when it is related to electricity, there's not always like one answer, because it depends on how much ampacity you need, or how much current you need, or if you're doing something outside or inside. So basically there are a lot of tables that kind of help give you how many conductors you need, or what size wire you need, or what material you need. And if you kind of scroll through chapter 9 of the code book, you'll see that there's a lot of tables that it gives in there. So it's kind of an overview of how the NEC, again, the National Electric Code, is broken down. Again, as a reminder, the textbook in itself is not categorized the same way, because the textbook just goes into specific subjects. So for question 11 on the project, you want to outline the code book, which is what I just talked about, not the textbook. So just kind of give a couple sentences for what each chapter talks about. And then the other thing I just want to mention briefly, I see we're running up on time already, is kind of how the sections work. So I'm going to just click on a random one here. Section 402. Or article. So essentially the number here where it says 402, that's the article. So article 4002. And then there are different sections of each article. So like, for example, you can see that this is article 402, section 1, article 402, section 7, and so forth. And then alongside that, there might also be like subheadings. So like this is article 402, section 9, part A, part B, and then even sometimes it'll go into like part 1 and part 2. So just be mindful of that, that's how you would say that. Or like this here, this is article 400, section 51, part A, number 3. So it really kind of breaks it down, and breaks it down even more layers than just one. And so like article 402, all of this is about fixture wires, but you can see that each section is about a different topic. And then when it's broken down further, like here, article 402, section 9 is all about marking. Part A talks about the method of marking. Part B talks about optional markings you might have. So again, it just kind of breaks it down further and further and further, just to kind of make it easier to read and follow. So that's how you would say all that. But with that, I say 39:51. So this was a fast 50 minutes. But hopefully this was helpful for kind of how the code book is outlined and for how the course is outlined. Again, kind of moving forward, I'll really focus on some of these project questions and some of these quiz questions. So if you do attend these, it's highly encouraged. I'll be here to help any way that I can. But with that, I will hand it over to all you to see if there's any questions or concerns at all. Again, biggest thing for this course, make sure that you're constantly staying in communication with me. I try to respond back in a day. If I don't, send me another email and I will make sure I respond back. And make sure that final project you're submitting at least a couple of times to get feedback on. Once you finish competency A questions, I would submit it and see where you stand, and then move on to part B. And same with the final exam, take it this week, see where you stand, and then you know what to go back and learn. But yeah, with that, if there's no questions, feel free to enjoy the rest of your Friday morning and evening. And I'll be back next Friday. Of course, if you want to meet before then, if you have any concerns, shoot me an email and we'll find time. But yeah, if there's any questions, you can ask now. No questions, feel free to log off. And it's nice to meet y'all. And I look forward to the next 7 weeks. But I'll stay on if there's questions. So